So welcome everyone to this first series of keynotes. So we will have 2 talks in a row, and I will ask you to wait for the questions after the second talk, and I'll explain to you how to ask questions afterwards. So it is with great pleasure that I present the first speaker and my dear friend, Mireille Joussemet from the University of Montreal. And she will be presenting her work on why and how to support autonomy when it's difficult to do so and when it matters most.
Thank you, Geneviève. I know this is usually not the last slide, not the first one, but I'm grateful for SDT, so I wanted to begin that way. SDT is not only a great framework for researchers, it can also lead to a lot of social good. It can help helpers. I've been interested in parenting ever since I'm a psychology student, so I'm very grateful that I got to read this chapter in which Wendy Grolnick, Ed DC, and Rich Ryan skillfully explained what parents should strive for to foster their children's value internalization and well-being. And that is to be involved, to provide structure, and to be autonomy supportive. Together, these 3 parenting components are said to satisfy children's basic psychological needs. As you know, those needs are said to be universal, so every child would benefit from autonomy support, no matter their age, no matter their developmental challenge. This is quite a statement because usually people like the idea of autonomy support, but only until they think of a very difficult child. And there's also this tendency to put autonomy support aside when it comes to behaviors that parents find very important, but that their kids simply hate. So I just want to point out that when I mention children, I think of all children, even very young ones. Reviewing autonomy support studies about preschoolers, toddlers, and infants revealed that they too seem to benefit from autonomy support. Similarly, when I talk about parenting, I am including all sorts of situations, even frustrating ones. So what is autonomy support? Typically, definitions and measures center around those 3 elements: provision of empathy first, rationales, and some choice. It's in this experiment led by Richard Kessner that these elements were first used to create an autonomy supportive condition. In that study, children were given some neatness instruction to follow during a painting activity. But what do we really need to be autonomy supportive? Is it grasping it conceptually? Knowing how to put some specific skills into practice? Personally, I felt I needed to learn on both fronts. Getting it right seems essential, at least as a researcher. And knowing what autonomy support sounds like also seems key. So I'll tell you about some conceptual and applied work. First, conceptually, we know that focusing on only one element is simplistic and potentially misleading. We also know that together, although those 3 elements are great when making requests, they're not usually useful in other situations. Moreover, there are common misconceptions around autonomy and around autonomy support, which can be barriers to knowledge transfer. In a search for an efficient way to convey the essence of autonomy support, Wendy and I reviewed other similar constructs in the parenting domain. I'm I'm very grateful for her partnership and patience during that journey. We found that there was a conceptual overlap between autonomy support, sensitivity, empathy, scaffolding, and responsiveness. We also learned other interesting things. For instance, there are many social, emotional, and cognitive benefits associated with those constructs across all developmental periods, but physical outcomes are less studied. We also realized that some of those other constructs also have conceptual issues. For instance, the majority of the most frequently used sensitivity measures include warmth, even though Mary Ainsworth never included warmth in her construct. Now, to refer to the common denominator, we selected the term consideration because it means taking into account. Children's development and well-being are facilitated when their parents take their states, their emotion, their viewpoints, their capacities into account. We also like the word consideration because it can be easily understood by parents and because the single concept can be used across a wide range of situations and ages. We did consider the word respect, but we did not select it because it's sometimes used to refer to admiration or deference, which would give precedence to children's views. So let me clarify. In this paper, we are not arguing against the term autonomy support. We need to use it. We need our theoretical framework. Other researchers need theirs. We do, however, invite researchers to use the consideration concept when transferring knowledge to stakeholders. Now, at the concrete level, what do we need to be autonomy supportive? We can certainly go back to these three elements, but putting them into practice is not necessarily natural or easy. And frankly, 3 elements is not always sufficient to stay autonomy supportive throughout the day. In terms of know-how, this book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and How to Listen So Kids Will Talk, written by Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish, it can be of great help. These 2 mothers of 3 wrote it to share what they had learned in their parenting workshops, led by a humanistic child psychologist named Keynote, whose writings also inspired the autonomy support definition I have been referring to. Faber and Maslish created a parenting program out of their book. Both of those are organized under those 6 themes. In total, parents get to learn 30 skills, which they're encouraged to practice during sessions and at home. All skills are illustrated with comic strips. For example, instead of, "Here, give the jar to me, sweetheart," the mom says, "A jar can be hard to open. Sometimes it helps to tap the lid with a spoon." Instead of, "What's taking you so long?" the dad says, "Tying shoelaces takes a lot of fancy finger work." We know that a lot of parents love this book. It is still a bestseller. Oh, it was written in 1980. Still a bestseller, and it has been translated in more than 30 languages. But does the how-to content really help parents help their children? That's the research question Geneviève and I have been working on together, supported by the CIHR, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. Geneviève will share our nice parenting results on Saturday. So I will focus on the child mental health today. So I'll begin by describing our first randomized controlled trial. Close to 300 parents of grade school children took part in this RCT. We targeted grade schools in order to inquire about children's perspective, because as they can fill out their own questionnaires when they reach 8 years of age. This was a waitlist RCT with 2 long-term follow-ups. The sessions were delivered weekly at their schools by dyads of trained facilitators. Now, prior to attributing any benefit to an intervention, it's crucial to establish that that intervention was indeed delivered and with integrity. It's like a gigantic manipulation check. It's Alexis Lafontaine who led it, assessing the 5 components of integrity. Results showed that exposure was great, as a majority of parents attended 6 or all of the 7 sessions. Regarding adherence, listening to audio tapes revealed that group facilitators delivered the content with great fidelity. Next, parents rated facilitators as highly empathic, enthusiastic, and prepared. And in terms of responsiveness, most parents were rated by facilitators as showing good or very good engagement. However, differentiation was not perfect, as some parents on the wait list reported at the end of the study that they had read the how-to book during the study. So did the parenting program, the how-to parenting program, have a positive impact on child mental health? The parent report we used to assess this is the child behavior checklist. It measures externalizing problems such as opposition and aggression, as well as internalizing problems such as depression and anxiety. Using the intent to treat approach, which keeps all parents in their assigned conditions, multivariate, multi-level analyses were conducted, controlling for the few variables that were found to be unbalanced across conditions. As you can see, while the how-to parenting program did not lead to greater decreases in internalizing problems, it did lead to greater decreases in externalizing ones. And this benefit was sustained over the following year. This effect looks big on the figure, but it's actually small in size. Next, in terms of child reports of our 8 to 12-year-olds, we inquired about their life satisfaction, their positive and negative affect, as well as their self-esteem. Overall, the how-to program did not lead to greater increases or decreases on any of these child-reported variables. But children's age tended to play a moderating role. So keeping in mind the limited age range for child reports, and thus the meaning of younger here, which is more around 8 or 9 years old, compared to 10 to 11, 12, results show that there were some program effects, but only among younger children. The how-to program tended to lead to higher life satisfaction among them, as well as higher self-esteem. It led to greater positive effect among younger children, well, 8, 9 years old, but it had no impact on their negative affect. Based on this evaluation, Genevieve and I think that this parenting program shows promise because it had some impact, even though the bar was set pretty high. It's hard to detect an impact in the general population, and when you keep all participants in their assigned condition, so waitlist parents who'd read the book, how-to parents who don't show up to sessions. That's what we mean by the stringent criteria. Now, perhaps you wonder if this parenting program would have a differential impact based on culture. So did we, and I'm glad that as part of her thesis, Naila Saib wanted to focus on the concept of cultural hierarchy. The 44 different ethnicities reported by our parents were coded based on Schwartz's system, in which nations fall on a continuum. India, for example, is a high score, and Norway is a low score example. These are the child mental health outcomes we looked at. You know them already. The results. The multivariate analyses that were conducted show no significant interaction. The presence or absence of effects was similar across levels of cultural hierarchy. So this is interesting, but we know that moderation analyses ideally require much larger samples. So a great future avenue would be replication studies to assess whether parents and children in different parts of the world would react the same way to the how-to parenting program. Which makes me think of these proposed criteria that distinguish probably efficacious interventions from well-established ones. Okay, so that was my not so subtle message. Maybe you also noticed that instead of weightless control designs, active control designs are preferred. This is the approach we took in our second program evaluation, this time with parents of preschoolers. So I'll tell you about the pilot study Jessica Corbeil ran with Geneviève and I. We recruited parents of 3- and 4-year-olds in family resource centers. Program delivery was online. That's why we made sessions shorter. In terms of the how-to reading, the recommended book was a little kid's version. Parents in our active control condition were offered the program called Nobody's Perfect. It provides social support and knowledge about children, their safety, and their development. Only parent reports were used, assessing parental autonomy support, children's internalizing and externalizing problems, as well as their socio-emotional strengths. In this small study, each outcome variable at time 2 was regressed on its baseline level. We used residual scores to represent change from time 1 to time 2. In a nutshell, tests showed that while there were improvements in both conditions, progress was greater in the how-to condition. I'm showing effect sizes here, but note that none of these effects were statistically significant. But this pattern of results encouraged Geneviève and I to plan a similar but much larger RCT. This time with follow-up measures and filmed parent-child interactions. We were thrilled to secure funding from the CIHR for this big RCT, and we are glad that it is now launched. Our first wave just began, and yes, the entire program evaluation will take us about 6 years to complete. In closing, I would like to highlight some parts of my title. Why support autonomy? Because of its healthy benefits for all children and all situations. When it feels difficult to provide autonomy support, it doesn't mean that children don't need it or don't deserve it. It may mean that there's an important matter that requires probably a nice mix of structure and autonomy support, and Geneviève will nicely elaborate on that issue, key issue, on Saturday. When it feels difficult to provide autonomy support, it may also mean that parents need more support, which brings me to the learning, the how. Now, I still don't know if parents need both types of knowledge, but I do think that when we, as experts, wish to advance and transfer knowledge, conceptual understanding is key, and that it can only help to learn and practice the nice how-to skills. This thank you is for Geneviève, who's such an amazing friend and collaborator. We thank our fabulous graduate students, as well as those other wonderful people. And this one's for you.